What is the truth in the stories we are told? We've been given a story of a world fueled by separation. We've become separate from one another, separate from the earth, ultimately separate from the true nature of ourselves. It's time we learn the truth. It's time you rewrite your story. It's time to realign with who it is that you really are. This is the fifth dimension.
You are infinite and eternal. We are infinite and eternal.
Our natural essence, we could say, is simply being.
We have this awakening coming together as a perfect storm.
We're ready for this. We have the capacity inside. We just got to find that.
All right, everybody, welcome into the Fifth Dimension podcast with me, Evan McDermott. This is an exciting episode for me to do here on this solocast. And ultimately, it is in celebration because my poetry collection is now available for purchase. The Mystical Collection, poems on love, freedom, and awakening. It's now available, ultimately using a mystical lens and really just going into my own spiritual journey. Over the last few years, I've just been exploring love. I've been exploring freedom. I've been exploring spiritual awakening and what all of these look like and how they play together. And ultimately, I didn't intend for these to get published as I was writing them, but I was just putting them together and had a big catalog going. And I realized that each poem really can serve as an invitation to step into the space of timelessness, to go inward, reveal the deeper truths of our nature, and ultimately uncover who we are. So this podcast is in celebration of the release. The link to purchase it, it is available right now for $19.99, which is actually a price that is going to have to go up once it hits Amazon because there's going to be third-party distribution fees and all that nonsense that you deal with the large corporations. But for the first few weeks, it is $19.99 if you click the link in my bio and you want to purchase it. A great way to support this show, a great way to support my work, and ultimately dive into really a meditative practice with these poems. So what I'm doing with this episode, I'm not just going to sit here and promote the poetry book the whole time. I'm going to read a few of the poems and ultimately talk about a lot of these concepts regarding love, freedom, and awakening. And also want to talk about the cultural implications in terms of art and poetry and what is the role and ultimately how we plant the seeds of awareness for a new paradigm that is based in love in an unconditional sense, freedom to be ourselves authentically, and ultimately awakening to the truth, to the deeper nature of our reality. So that's really what this episode is going to be centered on, and I'm very grateful that you are here to explore it with me. Again, you can go purchase a copy of the book if you would like. A lot of this is just original content that I haven't put out there, and it wasn't intended to be published. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to share this and provide this for you. Now, if you're a fan of the show, do subscribe, whatever platform you're on. We've been getting more ratings on Apple Podcasts lately. I greatly appreciate that. Really does help the algorithm. At least you can, do for the show. If you want to help us out, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, whatever platform you're on. Click the subscription button. You'll always be notified when there is a new podcast. And also head on over to mcdermott.substack.com. That is my Substack page, and I have been doing a lot more writing on there lately. You'll be notified when the podcast comes out, as well as get a lot of first access to some of the poetry that is in this book. Actually, I have published on Substack in the past. So you get access to my writing, you get access to different essays and perspectives that I've been really embodying, whether it's looking into these concepts of love, freedom, and awakening, or sharing news or sharing my opinion on certain aspects. There's a lot of good stuff happening over on mcdermott.substack.com, and it's free to subscribe, or you can do a donation model subscription and support this work. So head on over there. subscribe to the podcast. And if you're interested in donation-based tarot reading, I have a few spots available for that. You can just shoot me a message on Instagram or send me an email or go to my Substack, whatever it may be. I do have some availability for that, and we can either do it on Zoom, or I could just type up a written report and pull the cards for you and send it to you. And really, all you have to do is just let your intent be known to me on what you would like to explore within tarot, and I'll do it from afar and send you the report. Pretty easy, pretty simple on your end. Not much of a time commitment on that one. That's by donation. So give what you can. And I always say don't donate until after you get the reading, so then you can feel how it resonates and what you feel it's worth. So that's available to you. Shoot me a message if you're interested in that. But let's dive into a lot of these concepts. Let's dive into love, freedom, and awakening. And ultimately, what is the foundation for the mystical collection? Now, I've been writing poetry for the last few years, and really, this collection is the accumulation and the body of work over the last few years. Again, I mean, it's not every poem I've ever written in my whole life necessarily, but there is a lot that you'll see within this that represents my own spiritual journey and how it is that I have been feeling called to show up and express myself, ultimately to understand who I am in the purest sense of the word. Know thyself. Ultimately, we want to go out and we want to explore the truths of the world. We want to understand reality on the deepest sense, but ultimately, this world, it is an internal experience. It is an internal reflection. The external is an internal reflection. Our perception is what ultimately is going to create reality. What you are witnessing within here, what is taking place, the dialogue, the thoughts, the actions that are all aligned from your heart, that is what's going to create the basis for reality and how you choose to ultimately show up each day, right? So the first poem I actually want to read, it's a fairly short one, and it's called Answer the Call. And I feel like it's very representative in terms of starting on the hero's journey and opening ourselves up to the infinite possibilities that exist beyond the ordinary, beyond the mundane. If you look at any hero's journey model, ultimately you have to leave the comforts of your nest. You have to leave the mundane behind. You have to leave behind what you thought was home in order to explore truth, in order to see what's out there. And it's very representative for me because I feel like I have to continually engage in this new beginning process. I have to continually engage and be willing to leave the comforts of the old behind, because that seems to be the course of life as we go through these continual cycles of heroes' journeys. And sometimes they're simultaneous and they're overlapping. You have a new beginning here while this part of your journey is still going on, right? And it speaks to the harmonious intertwining nature of this life and how it is one large journey, and how there is no true beginning, there is no true end. Everything is interweaving, interconnecting. But it's important for us to continually take leaps of faith. It's important for us to continually open ourselves up to the callings within our own heart, because our desires are going to change, our motivations are going to change. Who it is that we are, we're going to continually peel back the layers of that onion. We're going to continually look into the great mystery. And we have to be willing to open ourselves up to what it is that we're going to find, right? So let me read this poem for you. It's a rather short one called Answer the Call. I hear the whisper in the air, freedom, escaping from my chains, letting go of self-limitations. I am free to fly again. The quest that lay ahead, an unknown, so much out of sight, trusting my heart to bring me forward, a faith to be guided through the night. So goodbye. While it may be hard to see me go, life has called me to go onward. It's time to trust in what I know. Answer the call. So much of this spiritual journey, so much of life and what we are especially navigating as a collective, there's so much uncertainty. There's so much faith that we need to have within ourselves One, to continually navigate the shadows, to continually have the courage to face the truth, to face responsibility. You know, living in alignment with the idea of radical honesty, radical responsibility. I mean, that in itself is a radical agenda. It is a radical way to live your life because, we will avoid the truth for the convenience of comfort, for the convenience of illusions. I still have blind spots within myself where I feel I don't always fully accept the truth. I don't always accept the circumstances of my reality. I attempt to, and I attempt to make peace and go into it. But oftentimes we do have blind spots. So it's important for us to continually ask the question, where is it that we are being called? How is it that we are showing up in the world? What is the impact that we would like to leave? And ultimately, what is our heart telling us? You can ask that question, what would love do now? What would love do now? What would love do now? Over here, over there, everywhere, right? And this actually is not a poem I was planning on reading, but I did write one called What Would Love Do Now? And, I suppose I do feel called to read it because I think it's important to open ourselves up to that question. What would love do now? You know, what is love first and foremost? I mean, shit, the mystical collection, poems on love, freedom, and awakening. What is love? You have to ask that question. What is freedom? What is awakening? Right? So when we're talking about love, love is that commitment to truth within oneself. It is that commitment to opening up your heart chakra, feeling the vulnerability, embracing the moments of openness, purity, truth, freedom. To love unconditionally is to drop the ideas, the stories, the judgments. It's to silence the inner critic and simply be with what is. It's to embrace the beauty that is ever present in our reality. So what would love do now? Ask yourself that continually as you go through life and you navigate the hero's journey into awakening, because there is never truly, there's not always a clear right or wrong, is what I'll say. We don't live in a world of black and white. We don't live in the binary choices that we're so accustomed to playing with in duality and thinking that we need to either go this path over here or this path over here when there's only two options. No, and regardless of the choices that you make in life, ultimately, you're going to be on the path either way, and you're going to have to take responsibility for your choices, and you're going to have to open yourself up to them. So connect in with your heart. And when you ask, what would love do now? You know the answer. You always know the answer. Your rational mind might not like the answer, but you know what you need to do. So what would love do now? Let's read this poem. Love would open our wings to heaven. In our shadow, she liberates the light. Here, she sings a song of freedom, a surrender to her ever familiar tune. Love sees our grace in this moment. She bears witness to it all. Our hidden shadows and self-judgments, sorrowed stories, and resentments of her beauty. Love's essence breaks down the walls of our boundaries. She's fully embracing of the madness. As a force of magic herself, she understands how this game can get reckless. Love relays the responsibilities of her vision. She requires our full commitment to her calls. We can't play a game that's based in conditions. It won't work when we run from the darkness of it all. Love's ready to light our heart a twin flame. She's ready to lead us from fear into her strength. On her chariot, we'll journey to the sacred unknown. She'll hold us in a rhythm beyond the illusions of this dance. Love remembers who we really are. She can't help we were born into this game. From the wombs of creation, our heart was set free. Our destiny was meant to be, but only if we could believe. Love is our infinite ocean. She reflects patterned waves of her way. She's got no place to go but home, back into our hearts, into the root of our souls. Love would embrace this second of silence. She gives grace for the change we can receive, giving it her all just for the chance to be together. We now know what love would do when we just can't see. Oh, what would love do now? What would love do now? Love is an acceptance of the chaos, of the madness, of these times that we're ultimately in. You could look back at human history, and you could say these times are unique, and I would agree to a certain level. I believe we have unique challenges. I believe we have unique technologies. Uh, we have a unique organizational method at the moment, in the sense where we can witness our interconnectivity through our technology. We can actually really begin to hone in on who we are through our systems. And I believe that shift is beginning to happen. But throughout human history, we have faced great challenge. We have faced great conflict. We have been living out this myth of separation. We've been living out this story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And ultimately, it is only the telling of this story that has made it a reality, right? It's because we live by that myth of separation that we perceive ourselves as separate. Remember, perception is what creates reality. If we're telling ourselves we are separate, if we are telling ourselves we are different, if we are closing off our hearts and putting up barriers around truth, vulnerability, honesty, and we can't embrace one another for the beauty that is ever present, of course, we're going to see that mirrored in the external world. The macro is just a representation for what's going on within ourselves. The wars that I see perpetrated in society, they're no different than the wars I have felt within my own heart because of fracturing my own soul and my own knowing of who I am. So, what would love do now? What would love do now? It would return to wholeness. It would return to unity. It would return to beauty. And it starts with an internal recognition of that force and of who we are. And, ultimately, I think this is a good segue into talking about the cultural shift that we're seeing take place and that is taking place. What is culture? Terrence McKenna talked a lot about that, and I really resonate with what he said. And that culture is not your friend. A lot of people think culture is a natural byproduct of our human evolution, and it's I guess the shallow definition of culture to me is that it is our music and this and that, and you have all of these different elements of organization and expression combined into one culture, right? And I think that that's not wrong to say that's what culture is. It's the byproduct of our human expression, ultimately. But what we're seeing is that culture is not our friend. Culture is ultimately conformity. It is the need to fit yourself within that box of the previously agreed upon set of circumstances, previously agreed upon set of ideas and expressions. And ultimately, when we put too much into culture and we put too much into needing to organize ourselves around old ideals, we create the scenario for totalitarianism. We create the rigid totalitarian within, ultimately, because anybody who is not fitting within that box of culture, anybody who is choosing to venture outside the norm and take the hero's journey into a deeper level of truth, into a deeper level of understanding, they're ostracized for doing so. Why? Because they are not part of the cult. Sure. Look at the word in itself. C-U-L-T. How often do you hear people say, "Oh, you're in a cult. This is a cult," and at all costs, we want to avoid being in a cult. And I think everybody can agree upon that, right? And yet here we are, all conforming to the largest cult known to man, which is the cult of our current methods of organization. So the cultural revolution, ultimately, it'll take place once we are willing individually to step into a new paradigm. Once we are willing to escape the chains, the illusions, and ultimately, this system and this culture, it is indoctrinated within us. When we're talking about fighting the system, we're really fighting ourselves, because it is a set of programs, it's a set of ideas, it's a set of illusions that make up this current way in which we perceive the world. It's not based in reality. I mean, you go step outside. Is there one thing that you can point to that is culture in a material form? Again, you can point to our expression, you can point to our creations, but all of this is just a mindset. It's all a conformed way of thinking in terms of how we're going to show up in the world. That's all culture is, and especially when we're choosing to conform to it, right? So really begin to think about, what boxes are you placing yourself in? Are you choosing to open up your heart to the great mystery that lives beyond the programming? And for me, this poetry is one way that I have been able to do that, and to express myself beyond what I know, right? That's the beauty of art. That's the beauty of poetry. That's the beauty of really diving into these realms, because you're exploring and tapping into something that isn't fully known. You don't necessarily, like when I'm writing a poem, I don't necessarily know what I'm getting into. I have to feel into it. I have to allow Great Spirit to move through me and express based upon that, right? And I learn through the expression itself, but then an integration of the expression, when I go back and I sit with it again, and I sit with it again, and I sit with it again. I read these poems, I get something from them every time, and I see it in a new light, right? That's what makes something sacred. That's what makes something beautiful, and ultimately, we're seeing in our culture the disregard of the sacred. We're seeing the disregard of beauty. I mean, just the other day, I saw on Twitter somebody throw a thing of tomato soup on a Vincent van Gogh painting to protest climate change. Like, what are you doing? Like, it is foolish to engage in the I would say the disregard of the sacred, because you're disregarding yourself. That is the impulse of the totalitarian, to destroy art, to destroy beauty, to create a world that is cookie cutter, black and white, and only in alignment with your inner totalitarian vision, to your conformity standards. And that goes for, whether it's art and expression, that goes for free speech, it goes for how people choose to act, it goes for ideas. That's why it's so important to honor yourself first and speak up when you want to speak up, even if you fear the cancel culture mob, or you fear all these different, I would say, traps of conformity. Ultimately, I mean, why do they cancel people? It's so that they'll conform. Why do they throw tomato soup on Vincent van Gogh's painting? Well, they want you to conform to the climate ideology. It's the same type of thing, right? And our innate spiritual wisdom and who we are and our connection to nature is often hijacked and used against us for the purpose of these conforming agendas. So really sit with, what are your beliefs about world? Remember, in the word belief, B-E, and then what is the next three letters? L-I-E, a lie. A belief is not based in reality is based within the mind, and therefore it is a story. And is a story true? It can be, it can have elements of truth, but is it ever a fully articulated, expressed, like here, now, present truth? It's a question to meditate on. I don't necessarily have an answer for you on that. Um, so really recognize what your beliefs are, and are they acting? Are your beliefs, when they're put into action, acting on that force of love, that force of beauty, working to preserve the sacred and ultimately explore the unknown? Or are they acting in alignment towards ideologies and acting in alignment towards something that is more conformed and not original? Because what is creativity? It is the going inward, sitting in the silence, and allowing something to come in through that. A lot of people think creativity is mimicry, and we see a lot of that within our culture. I think that's, again, another manifestation of conformity and another manifestation of the inability to go inward and sit with oneself, or just not, maybe not the inability, because everybody has that ability, but the unwillingness due to fear, because we fear ourselves more than anything else. And if that were not the case, we wouldn't be fearing these silly external agendas that are often pushed on us. If we had a true understanding for who we are, none of what would be taking place in terms of the division, the conformity, all of that, self-sabotage, none of that would be possible, right? And that temptation to fall into conformity is always going to be there. That temptation to sell our soul for the false promises of a lot of these illusionary ideas, it's always going to be there. And what I actually want to read next from Mystical Collection is a work called Devilish Temptations. And it really does talk about this. And this wasn't even originally a poem. This was me just writing out my thoughts, and I turned it into poetic format because I think it's really important to explore, the devilish temptations that do live within, right? So let's read this. Devilish Temptations. I met the devil. He was not who I expected him to be. You see, I never found him out there. I could have projected that lens, but with the world serving as a cosmic mirror, who am I to bypass the devil within me? The devil is my own temptations towards self-sabotage. The devil is my desire to be polarizing regarding my own beliefs. The devil is the tendency to close my heart to what I don't fully understand. The devil was never here to haunt me, but to force me to acknowledge the pain that was driving so much of my own unconscious behavior. For many people, maybe the devil's lessons are too much to take responsibility for. It's far easier to think the state of the world is a byproduct of a devil that hasn't influenced their own actions. It's easy to say the devil has taken control over our world, but we have been spared, setting the story for us to be the hero. But as much as nobody will save you, you are not meant to save others. Western culture has become dominated by conformity. It's fallen prey to the lustful temptation of instant gratification, trauma bonding, and hedonism. Yet, you become the devil tyrant when you attempt to liberate others into your own value system without acknowledging the prominence of your shadow. Are we truly meant to awaken others? Awaken to what? Freedom is as simple as living life with an open heart. Meet others beyond beliefs, ideas, and the false myth of separation. Unity comes only when we move beyond the illusions of light and dark, beginnings and endings, or good and evil. Acknowledge the devil within first, and then you'll realize he too was nothing more than a projection of your own unconsciousness. I think it's really important to sit and integrate that concept of the devil within and really take responsibility for our own shadow, and ultimately how that plays into our own desires, how it plays into the way we show up into the world. Are you fighting for freedom for the same reason that somebody fights for the COVID narrative, right? Are you attempting to liberate others into your own value system and create a conformed carbon copy of you instead of allowing them to be themselves? Ultimately, we really do. Um, we really easily, I'll say this, fall trap to the need for some sort of external validation of what we are doing or who we are is quote unquote correct or right. And often we try and do that by forcing others into our own values, into seeing exactly what it is that we see, instead of just trusting in the knowing of your heart, instead of just trusting in who you are and that you are already liberated, you are already worthy, you are already enough, and you don't need to force anything onto anyone. Oh my, all this talking. Oh, needed some water there. So I guess when you're chatting on a podcast and you're reading all this poetry, you get a little thirsty, Stay hydrated, folks. Um, but it is really important for us to continue to take radical levels of responsibility in terms of where it is that we are aligning our intentions and where it is that we are aligning our actions, because we could easily fall victim to the totalitarian mindset, to the illusion of separation, to the myth that we have been programmed within us. And ultimately, even the spiritual journey, do you use it for an egoic destination? I want to become enlightened. Why? Why do you want to be enlightened? What are you gaining from that? It's the same type of question. It's the same type of idea. How is the egoic pursuit of enlightenment any different than an egoic pursuit of $1 billion? So it's no different. You're still striving, you're still desiring, you're still searching for something outside of yourself. Can you just be present with what is and accept that that's enough and that's fine? Simple question. It's a very simple question. Um, but ultimately, we have to allow parts of ourselves to die. We have to go into mourning for the ego while we're still alive. We have to go into mourning that it's what we thought, who we are not who we thought we were ultimately. And that's a scary truth for a lot of people. It's a harsh reality for a lot of people because we think we are so important. We think we are all this, all that. And yes, there is beauty, there is wonder, joy, all of these wonderful things about ourselves, and being uniquely human is something we should own and embrace. But in the same light, you're already that. What more is it that you're searching outside of yourself? Uh, Often our pursuits are really done. Even when we say we want to be of service to others, we're being of service to others for the validation that we are somehow enough and that we are making a difference. So be very mindful about your true motivations and your true desires, and be honest about yourself in terms of what it is that you're actually searching for. It can be a tough pill to swallow sometimes, but it is worth examining for the purpose of deeper levels of truth and deeper levels of peace, ultimately. So I do want to read another poem that is in a similar light in what I am speaking about here. And it really speaks to allowing the walls of who you think you were to come crashing down, really allowing yourself to die in the pits of the fiery ash and be reborn ultimately in transformation. Death is not something that we need to fear in a physical sense, but also in a spiritual sense, because we are going to be confronted with that death and with that need for transformation continually throughout our lives. So, this poem is called The Tower. I want your love, but I know it's not mine to keep. When your heart feels closed, no, I understand why you flee. Hope will never die, even in the shadows of night. Faint roars of thunder. Maybe one day lightning will strike. Your star still shines, waiting to place your hand in mine. Our hearts can ignite, dual twin flames to provide the light. I found home in you, but commitment requires a dream. We can't escape fear, only bring courage together as a team. Patiently waiting, abundant choices must be made. Owning our burdens, danger illuminates our strength. Peace within the chaos. This was never truly an end. Just as we began, hearts will open as we ascend. The tower crashes. Safety falls away to despair. The phoenix now rises. Our hearts breathe through fiery air. From one back to two, we choose now to play the game. Pain never over, but love and peace can take the reign. That is The Tower. And for me, that speaks to a deep, 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 deep archetypal role that we continually embody within this human experience. And if you're familiar with tarot, I mean, certainly you may have picked up on this being a nod to the Tower card, right? Where the foundation of who we are, it comes crashing down at certain points of our lives. You know, I've experienced that so many times. You think you're in the comfort of who you are and you're there and you've made it, and then boom, it's like the universe says, you want change? You want to step into truth? All right, let me test you here. And you continually have to step into that death portal and let go of who you thought you were. Let go of what you thought love was. Let go of those ideas, those beliefs, and ultimately embrace the pain that comes with it. Embrace the teachings, embrace the wisdom. You know, can you sit in the pits of fire? Can you let yourself burn? Can you feel that burn as you're doing it and actually not run away, as we are so accustomed to doing with pain, but to move directly into it, but to feel directly into it? You know, that is your center for liberation. That is where you're going to find freedom. If you can sit and find comfort within the chaos, if you can touch the fires and not be burned, you are free. You are free. How do you do this? It's through cultivating an understanding of who it is that you are. The external world, what happens in it, it matters, but in the same paradoxical sense, it doesn't matter. Why? Because your perception, how you choose to show up in the reality, is going to create your level of awareness. It's going to create your emotions. It's going to create your circumstances, your scenarios. And the reason we are slowly being guided into a conformed mindset, into transhumanism, totalitarianism, whatever you want to call what we're potentially looking at on a collective scale, if you gaze into the abyss of that darkness, that's only possible because people are choosing that path for themselves, with comforts, with convenience, with the diseased system that is living within them and the indoctrination. You know, do you take the easy path? Do you take the path of comfort? Do you avoid the hardship? Do you avoid the truth? Do you avoid responsibility? Are you disregarding the beauty that is within you? The answer is yes to that, then of course you're going to mirror that through your actions in the external world. It's no wonder we are where we are. And it's a miracle. We're not further along based on how this story has been unfolding, right? But this serves as an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. This serves as an opportunity to sit in those flames. I often think about that Buddhist monk who set himself on fire in the protest. And it's a very famous image. I'm sure you're familiar with it. I often think about it because it is such a profound, profound image to set oneself on fire, to allow yourself to die within the flames for something much larger than the individual self, but recognizing that thing that's much larger than the individual self is also you. It lives within you, right? And death, it's an illusion. The Great Spirit cannot die. You ask you sit and you can ask God about, hey, why are you doing this? Like, this is sick. Like, look at what is being perpetrated here. How could you allow this to happen? It's experiencing itself in new forms, new experiences, and ultimately, just by the very nature of polarities, when you swing so far one way, you're going to have that opposite charged pole, right? So in order for us to evolve and step into our heart center and open ourselves up in such a radical new way, we had to go into the pits of despair. We had to burn. We had to feel the pains of separation. We have to feel the pains of separation if we want a reunification. This is the result of us choosing this story from the beginning. And it's necessary for us ultimately, if we would like to shift into this new paradigm. We have to feel. If we don't choose to feel, we're not going to heal, and we're going to be stuck. We're going to stagnate. And if we stagnate, we don't move into love, beauty, truth, because stagnation is resistance of love. And I have one more poem that I would like to read. And it's the last poem that I actually put in the book. And it's called Seeds of Beginnings. And you'll hear why I put this one last in just a moment. And it's a short one, but it's I think it kind of speaks to the timeless nature of what we're playing into here. Seeds of beginnings, the harvest of endings. Understand, they are one and the same. Cycles of life, stories of illusion, all just moments in time that we play. Out beyond labels, from dual into union. Love's when you learn from the teacher of pain. Leaning on our strength, new choices must be made. I'll see you in the timelessness again. There's no beginning. There is no end. There is only one continuous present moment. And in that present moment, what will you choose to tap into? The beauty, the love, the freedom. You don't need to fight for freedom. You're already free. You don't need to awaken. You're already awake. You don't need to be enlightened. Or find enlightenment. You're already enlightened. You don't need to liberate others. If they so choose, let them sleep. If they would take your hands, let them take your hand. At the end of the day, there's only so much you can do to create change. When you really go into the mindset that you need to change the world, oftentimes you're going to be driven by that totalitarian impulse. Take a step back and feel into your heart who it is that you are, and the beauty that's already present, and the love that we can share with one another. The solutions that we're looking for are so simple. They are so simple, which is why it makes it so difficult, because we think we need to counter with the same energy that's being thrown onto us. And it's our reactionary programming, our survival instincts that make us want to do that. And there's a time to pick up your sword. Don't get me wrong. There's a time where love would defend herself with honor. But in a lot of these moments, we simply need grace. We simply need beauty. We need to remember who we are. And hopefully, with this poetry collection, I can help you to do that. And that's really going to wrap up this episode. I hope you enjoyed the poems. I hope they can be of service to you. If you're listening to this right when it comes out, the first 2 weeks, this is the poetry collection is $19.99. Once it hits Amazon and some of those other distributors, the price unfortunately does have to go up just to cover some of the third-party costs. But right now it's $19.99, over 100 pages worth of poetry, and just speaking to what we're talking about here today: love, freedom, awakening, the beauty that's all present. This is what I've been sitting in and trying to express, and not just express, but embody and truly own. And, if you'll take my hand and walk with me on this journey, I'm open to doing so. So it's going to wrap up this episode. Head on over to mcdermott.substack.com. Leave a subscription. You can donate, and you can do a free subscription, whatever it may be. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to the podcast, does help the algorithms. And check out and purchase the Mystical Collection if you feel called to do so. This doing so will really support the show. Really support the show. This is probably one of the most impactful ways you can support the show, but also go on your own inward exploration, and we can really plant the seeds of love, freedom, and awakening within ourselves so we can give those fruits to others. So that's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe because we have more great episodes on the way in the very near future. And I'll see you all next time. So long.